Welcome to StartupHakk. This is our series about coding for entrepreneurs. I've often said that the best way to be an entrepreneur is to learn to code and to start writing your own stuff. And ultimately, at the end of the day, whether you're just managing contractors or whether you're actually building your own product, learning to code yourself is one of the best things you can do to become an entrepreneur. So let's go ahead and dig in and get started. Welcome to StartupHakk. My name is Spencer Thomason. I am the CEO and co-founder of CleanRouter, as well as many other products. Here are some lessons that I've learned building a successful business while challenging startup norms. My challenge is to push you to rethink startup success. Welcome to StartupHakk. All right, let's go ahead and dig in and get started. So today we're going to cover how to clone from the Get Repo, how to get started on one of your very own first coding projects, and let's dive in and get moving. So, see if I can select my browser here. So here's our code samples, and today we're going to work on the first code sample of 01. But each time you do this, we're just going to go ahead and clone the whole repository. So to go ahead and do that, click here, click this, and you'll see that it's copied. Now we're going to open Visual Studio, and okay, with Visual Studio open now, what we're going to do is we're going to hit clone a repository. We're going to paste in that link that we just got. Now it's going to want to take it to here. I personally prefer to just go to like C code, and then once I'm in here, I select the folder, and then I usually just type /StartupHakk and hit clone. Now that will go away, and it's going to open up Visual Studio. And so once Visual Studio is open here, then I'll drag it back over to that screen where we can all see it. And now with Visual Studio open, we're going to select Visual Studio. Okay, and now we've got our code project up here. So we're just going to go ahead and collapse this one because today we're going to work on the first one, the To-Do Web API. So this is the first project that we're going to run, and it's set as the runnable project, and so you can actually set that one to run. We're going to talk a little bit about each of these, and so as usual, everything starts in the program.cs. So this is what's going to fire off and run your application. So this has gotten minimized dramatically with .NET Core 6, and so these have gotten even easier. One of the things that I think is great, you could use it as like a in-memory cache storage. I've actually never tried it as in production, but one of the things that's really handy for an easy tutorial like this is to add a DB context that adds an in-memory database called to-do list. And so this is one of the ones that's easy to spin up right out of the bat. We're also going to add Swagger, as this is going to make it easier for us to be able to learn about the APIs. And so in general, I always use Swagger anyways. In general, in production, you would want to make sure you secure this. And there's some good documentation here about how to secure this using OpenAPI. We're not going to secure this because it's a sample. So if we run this, we'll talk about a little bit of the other parts. So we also have a controller, and we'll talk a little bit about what these controllers do. And what each of these various endpoints are going to do for our controller. So this controller class is what's going to control the APIs. And then we have the models. And so we have the to-do context. And so this one is what's defining the list of to-do items. And then this is the definition of what a to-do item is. And so then this then turns it into a database set and makes it really easy for our coding sample. So essentially this creates an in-memory database, which really is just using as a list of these to-do items. So that's what this one is, and these to-do items are the very simple items. So it has an ID, a name, and a Boolean of whether it's complete or not. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about these, but I think we're going to kind of work these backwards, and let's go ahead and run our code sample, and we'll go back and forth. So you can see that if you click the play button, it's going to start building, and you can see some of the diagnostic tools and things that will spin up and run. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our browser here, and we'll look at our code sample. Oh, not the code samples. We're going to look over at Swagger. Give me 1 second here. All right, and now we've got our Swagger running. So this page is Swagger, and you'll see that it uses the REST verbs of get, post, another get, a put, and a delete. And this is going to help us to show how to build an API. And so this is a very simple rudimentary API. So we're going to start off. What this does is this actually uses curl underneath the covers. And so if I hit try it, you'll actually see it'll give us the curl command that it's going to execute. And this is, if you were running a command line, you could run this curl command and use this request URL. And right now the response is just an empty array or an empty list. And so right now there's nothing in our database because we haven't put anything in our database, and it's an in-memory database. So every time we run the application, we're going to get a new database instantiation. And so this is going to run every single time. Now, the next part is a post. And so this is actually how we're going to put some things into our database. So let's go ahead and click the try it button. And now this is a format is JSON. And so if you're not really sure what JSON is, you can look at what the basics of JSON is. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So JSON is the basic language that most commonly is used for REST. And so it's a good, easy way to be able to format JavaScript into an object. So in this case, we've got a very simple one. We're going to start with ID of 1. We're going to call it my cool item. And then we're going to go ahead and leave that as true. So if I execute, now it's going to say that it'll actually show me the actual curl. So this is the curl, if you wanted to copy and paste this into a command line, that would actually do it. And you can see that the response body is this and that it worked correctly. So we got a 200, which says it worked. Now, if I go back up to execute the get, it's going to execute, and now you can see my one item in the list of my array of to-do items. So let's go add a second item. So the second one, we're going to give number 2. We're going to say this is not a cool item. Not cool item, because is complete. We're going to say it's false. We'll hit execute. And that one gave us a response of 201, so it's good. And it was a success. So we are all set now. Now, if I go and execute this top get item again, you'll see now that I have 2 items in my database. Now, we can collapse these. Now, if I want to go and actually look and say, let's say I want to retrieve just the second item. So I don't want to get the first one. I want to get just one item out of the list. I can hit get of item number 2. You can see now that your request URL is going to look like this because it's the to-do items, and then the curly brace is the ID. So request item 2, and it goes and gets us that full second item. If I change this to 1, we can get the second one, or the first one. Now, let's say that I want to change it so that the first one is not cool. We definitely want to, we could change the first one. And it actually looks like our body isn't quite complete, because in order to change this, we would need to be able to change the content, and I don't think we're quite ready to change the content. But let's say, let's go ahead and add another one. Let's go ahead and add a third one. We're going to say this is also not cool. Okay, so now we have a third one in there. So now if we go and retrieve the whole list, we can see we have 3. My cool item, the not cool, and then also not cool. Now, let's say that we want to delete the second one. So in this case, we hit try it, and we'd want to say we're going to delete the second one and hit execute. And looks like it was a 200, which is a success. If we come back up here and fetch the whole list again, now our list is only going to have 1 and 3. So you can see that this is a pretty cool way, and this is all, so this UI here is all just Swagger. In the reality of the matter, there's no actual UI with this project. So let's switch back over to Visual Studio here. We're going to run through some of these code samples a little bit and talk a little bit to them. So one of the first things I like to do is to collapse these, because you can always just hover over them and they pop back up, or click on them and they'll pop back up. And so if you need to hit something, you can always pop those back up. It's a personal preference. You'll see all different developers arrange Visual Studio differently. Now, if we want, let's go ahead and start with pausing to how we're getting that whole list. So let's put a breakpoint right here. Now, and I'm going to go click back over to Swagger. And so I can only show one screen at a time here. So if I pop back over here to Swagger, and so I'm going to execute the get to do items list. You can see that it'll stop right at the breakpoint. So I can hit the F10 key, and I can step through this. So my to do items is not null. I can expand this and look at it and say, so this entity type is, this to do items actually has. So that's not null, and it has actually a list of items in it. So what this is going to do is it's going to take our current context, our database context, it's going to get the list of to-do items, and it's going to send it out as a list. And so this will actually now return that result set in the list. So it's getting all three of these and then returning them back to the UI. So this is a very handy tool to be able to debug. So let's go through what these are doing. So because this is async, it means that it can run asynchronous, and so you can use JavaScript, you can use other Angular, other web front ends. And using these, you can call asynchronously, meaning the whole page won't block while it actually makes this one executed call to go get this list. So what it's checking here is it's saying, hey, as long as the items are not null, otherwise it will return an error, return, and then the await keyword means, await works with the async. So if you have async, you have to have await. And grabs the context, gets all the to-do items, and adds them to a list, and then sends them back to the API. So the way that this is defined is that an HTTP GET. Now, if you want to get just a specific item, then this is where we were passing in an ID. We're checking to make sure that the database is null. And this is good coding practices to make sure that we if it's null, that it's going to return an error. Otherwise, we say find async, and it's actually going to look inside of this list of this database set and find the one that has that ID. As long as this returned item isn't null, it would again return an error. Otherwise, it returns just that one item. Next, if we want to do a put, what this is going to do is put is generally used for an update. And so in this case, we would have to post the ID as well as the full body of what we wanted to do. And this would actually then go and update. You can see it actually would say and take the entry that has the to-do item. It would actually take the state and set it as modified. And it would actually update the to-do item with this item that is passed in. Now, and so that's put. For your post, this is where we were inserting a specific item. So we send a to-do item. It checks if the to-do items list is null, and if so, then we can't enter into it if it's null. Otherwise, it just adds this new to-do item. It awaits the save change, and then returns that we successfully did this. Then for delete, it also runs and says, we'll do the same thing where it takes this, it finds the one that we're wanting, and then it removes that particular item and saves it and then returns. The last is just a helper method that we wrote called to-do item exists, and it checks and says, it's using what's called a lambda or a link expression to then go and find if any of the values, if that value exists or not. And this just makes it so that the other places that we've called these are easier to find. So a little hint here is if you click on this, you'll see that it will actually highlight anywhere that's used. You also can say, go to references, find all references, and you can go find where this is used. So in our put, it checks if that item already exists, just to make sure that we don't add more than one, because the ID needs to remain unique. So I hope that something I've said here helps a little bit to understand how an API works. This is a pretty down and dirty basic API. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about Swagger and about APIs and about coding APIs in .NET. If you have any questions, feel free to leave comments down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will catch you next time and talk on our next sample. Thanks.